All right, let's see. That was scary. Doing captchas right before you're supposed to go on, waiting for those buses and crosswalks to show up. Am I on? Did I get there? Chat. Okay. QA. Okay, I think we're good. I'm gonna do. I think I'm gonna do some virtual close folding while it's still fresh in my brain. But let's get warmed up by. There's a question that came up on. I don't remember where I saw it, but crap. Let me sign in here. Yep. And this is gonna be that. Yes. Approve. No. My thumb was too sweaty. All right. Or something came up where if you're, let's go out of edit mode. So we're going to fold his clothes in a bit. But what we're going to do first is go over here to, let's say, a sphere. Drag it out. Go in here to edit mode. Make Polymesh 3D. Go into polyframe. And you can, if you want to wrap a curve brush on an object, you can go to BI, brush insert. Grab something that's a curve like IMM curve. Has brushes that have things that are built on curves. So, for example, this necklace link, if you hold down, if you just kind of drag on your object, it'll kind of stick to your object if you have the right settings, which most of your curve settings are going to be in your stroke menu here. Curve. So curve mode is where you turn on a curve mode to have an object attached to a curve, and that could be a brush stroke or an IMM. Snap, I think is... Snap should be what snaps this object to this object, and then when you move it around, it should continue to snap to that object. That's can be a little hit or miss depending. I don't know. There's some brushes where that's not the case. And then also bend start and bend end, etc. So here's an IMM brush, and then if you want to wrap this IMM brush around this object, you can hold down Shift, and it will sometimes wrap around the underlying object. Now, it's not going to connect in some cases, especially if it's a tripart brush. If you go down here to brush modifiers, you see triparts is turned on. There's two types of brushes that you can make with an object or like an IMM attached to a curve like this. One of those is just a repeating shape. So if we go in here to like BC brush curve tube, this is just a tube that follows along with this shape. So in this case, this is actually one of the brushes where if you hold down Shift and it goes around the object, it will meet up and attach. You won't have to do it manually. But I think that's more the exception rather than the rule. Usually your brush probably isn't going to meet up on the other side. Let me see. Oh, another thing too is if I go in here to BC brush, well, BC is all your brushes with a curve attached. BI is brush insert mesh brushes, and some of those do have like IMM curve, IMM cylinder, IMM army curve. These ones have a curve attached to that. So when you hold down Shift and go around your object, hopefully it'll go around the entire object. Now, if you want a little more control, let me give you some resources here. So here's my ArtStation page that has projects with videos in them. So if you want to see previous live streams and, oh, there's another thing. On this baseball guy, you can slice and add a custom IMM curve. So yeah, we can talk about that. But that's one example. And then also on here, if we go in here and type in like curves or controlling, if I spell that right. Yeah, controlling ZBrush curves. Curves helper. Some of these are a little bit old. I probably should go in and update those, huh? But anyway, if you really want to control it, you can give yourself a path. So one easy way to do that is go in here to slice, and you can go through here and you can just kind of slice through your mesh, and that will give you two polygroup, basically a polygroup border. That now you can go in here to stroke, turn on polygroups. That'll and you're pinning this frame mesh button with polygroups turned on. That'll frame your mesh. So now, if you wanted to go around your object like previously, just hold down Control Shift and just slice through the entire object, and then go in here and say frame mesh, and there you go. It'll go around your object. You can see if Shift isn't working, this is an alternative. You can duplicate your object off, and again, BI brush insert, IMM army curve M, and I will get to the point in just a second. And then you can have this thing go all around. This one met up pretty good. If on this, in this case, where it's like a bunch of objects that just go stacked next to each other, you can just fill in the blanks. So you can like tap off to get rid of that curve, or go over here and say curve, Oh, question. What brush did you use to make the Space Marine suit? Space Marine. This one, I feel like I've done a couple Space Marines. Or you could Halo 2 Space Marine. I've done a couple Space Marines. I guess you could even call this little black and white dude kind of a Space Marine. She could be a Space Marine. Tell me what Space Marine exactly. Oh, armor brushes. Gotcha. Like hard surface brushes. Well, let me give you this. Drive transfer. This will be hard surface linear walkthrough. There's a whole bunch of resources. If you scroll down, let me copy this link to you. In here, if you keep scrolling down, there's a whole bunch of artists that have particular. I mean, I can walk you through some of this, but these are the real pros. So, and there's also kind of broken down into kind of brute force, where you go through and you're just kind of you finesse geometry into the shape and go through. Just kind of get the geometry where you want it, ZRemesh, and then really kind of clean it up with brushes, and then go in and alpha stamp and stuff. And then this is kind of a mix. It's software stuff where it's like a little bit of ZModeler, and then some brushwork on top of that. And then down here, complete brute force to rebuild, like Bennett or Mike Nash, where you go through and you build your ZBrush model, and then you go in and you just build every square inch of it, and then you go in with your box modeling skills and continue to add details with your SubD modeling based on your ZBrush concept. And then SubD and mixed solutions, Chivang, hard surface, mesh fusion, and there's all sorts of ways. So long story short, go in with clay brush and Dynamesh, and maybe a little bit of box modeling or Booleans, and go nuts. All the way to, doing some really, and that there's nothing wrong with that. That's, get your idea in the round and then figure out how you want to rebuild it with primitives, or how you want to rebuild it with ZModeler, or how you want to go into another program and retopologize it with subDs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So start there if you want. And, we can talk more about that. So anyway, I went through here and we deleted that curve, and now I want to split this curve off. So I'm going to say split mask points, which is under your subtool split menu. And let's say, just for the sake of argument, or demo, I should say, this one will be obvious, but and actually they're all fairly obvious, but just to make sure it being explicit, Control Shift drag, and let's say we delete hidden. So let's say, hey, you know what? This didn't actually meet up. How do I resolve this? Well, you just grab one of these. So you can do Control Shift, but that'll select the entire polygroup. You could go in here to polygroup auto groups, but now you've got polygroups for every single individual object. So what I like to do is just Control Shift drag over a little part of an object, Control Shift A, that's visibility, grow all. Down here, so geometry, visibility, grow all. So grow to polygroup is Control Shift Q, and then grow all is like if anything that's vert welded. So you can see the little top part here, and I can do Control Shift Alt and then Control Shift A. So now I've got this entire bullet here. I can mask, invert that mask, hit W, and then just literally Control drag out a copy, and that'll kind of complete the thing, right? So now if we delete that, and let's hit Control W, and we'll elongate this out, and Control Shift, and this is another thing too, is if you want to make a path, don't be afraid to be like, okay, BSH, and just get sloppy with it. So go into Snakehook Brush, turn on Sculptures Pro if you want. You can go through here and be like, hey, I just need a path for my geometry that kind of does this, let's say, and maybe from this side it does this. There's a million different ways you can do this, but this is going to be like the sloppiest way to do that, right? And then you can go through here. You can even say if it's going to curve back around, you can say, okay, yeah, this is actually going to plug in. But of course, Snakehook doesn't plug things in. But if you go through here and you say geometry Dynamesh, and you Dynamesh this up, and then you go in here and you inflate this, and then Dynamesh it again, or just Control drag to Dynamesh. There we go. That'll sew it all up for you, and now you have a path that does something. Then you just need to go through here, and you need to go back to that. Again, this is just for creating a path for geometry to sit on. There's a million ways to do this. This is the sloppiest way. which is sometimes the best way. So if I don't want to go through this object accidentally, you can hold down Control, go in here to Auto Masking, turn on Backface Masking, and then you can just go through. The only reason I did that is so if it's thin, I don't accidentally use my mask brush to go to the other side. And I'm just going to mask along that geometry bridge that I made, and let's say this is the path that I want. Control W, make it a polygroup. Control Shift Tap to isolate it. Geometry Modify Topology, delete hidden. Deformation, polish by feature, open circle. Just tap that a few times, and then ZRemesh half, depth size down to 0. Keep it nice, even quads, and then just keep hitting that button. And then eventually you'll get something reasonable. If you want to grab these ends off here, say Geometry Modify Topology, delete hidden. Those sharp edges will kind of clue ZRemesher in a little bit better that you want this to kind of be a strip. And worst case scenario, you can go through here and you can say, like, you know, bridge 2 points with your ZModeler brush, B, Z, M, hover over an edge, hit space bar, choose bridge 2 points, and then you can go in here and just say collapse edge. Now we've got an entire strip along that path, and then we can say hover over an edge with a ZModeler brush, polygroup, polyloop, tap Alt. There is our controllable thing. And if you want it even smoother, again, just go in here, deformation, polish by feature, tap that, that'll smooth it out. Again, number of ways to make this path, but we're going the sloppiest way. Now all you have to do is go in here and say frame my mesh, and then again, BI, brush, insert, IMM, curve, M, whatever, necklace link, tap that, S to update it. You could even go through here, you can hold down Control, or even Shift. You can go through here and kind of smooth this thing out if you want to. Let me see if there's Alt. Right, is it Control? Yeah, you can Control spin this thing based on the influence part that you want here. A lot of fun, neat things you can do. Now, if you can't tap off to get rid of that curve, just go over here and hit delete. And then I like to do like a visibility hide point to hide any mask points, and then split hidden or delete hidden. Then you got that. Now, that doesn't answer the original question I wanted to answer. This is just kind of a warm-up. A warm-up, unscripted, which usually means I'm just going to ramble and lose the point. But if we go through here and we frame our mesh, and then we want our brush to go all the way around, but if we go in here to, like, again, BI brush insert IMM curve, and then grab a necklace, and then we put this on, well, here's the other thing too. If you have X symmetry turned on, and in this case, if I turn on floor, actually the symmetry would be in Z. Sorry about that. We'll say transform symmetry in Z. So let's say we have symmetry turned on, and you're like, okay, great. And you've been working in symmetry, and then you tap to update this. You're going to say, oh, gross. Why is my IMM look weird? It's because it's doing it twice. It's doing it across X symmetry. So just tap X to go out of toggle symmetry off, and then it'll just give you one around. Now, again, it's not going to meet up, right? So if you have a tube that doesn't meet up, or an IMM tri-part curve brush that doesn't meet up, you can just tap off, say split mask points. We can, you know, get rid of these little end caps if we want it to be seamless. And then this is where it gets a little finessey. Again, just Control Shift, drag, mask, invert, W, Alt tap to find that pivot, Control drag out a copy, and then, or you could even, I mean, if you want to get real fancy, you could make an IMM brush and, I don't know, hold down Control and make it the same brush size, but that's a little much for this type of work. And here's another thing too. If you want to move these things individually, if you make your draw size of 1, go in here to brush, auto masking, turn on topological. You can just move around an individual object pretty quickly. Or if that doesn't quite work as well as you would have hoped, just make your brush size really big. Just tap S on your keyboard and then move brush, and you can kind of move stuff around without being too crazy. Now on this one, you could go in here to Polygroups, Auto Groups, W, Control tap the individual polygroup here, and now you can individually mask out very quickly just by Control tapping with your gizmo, etc. Now, I was hoping, let's delete that. I was hoping I would think of, while I was doing that in the back of my brain, I was like, Mike, think of insert cylinder, will that do it? IMM curve. Think of a tube one that you would want to bridge. I guess, or we could just, you know, we can make our own. Let's go out of edit mode. Let's hit Control N. Sorry, I'll get to your questions in a second. Cylinder. Go into edit mode, and before we make it a Polymesh 3D, we can sculpt on. We can go down here to initialize, and we can say, you know, let's make it simple. So we'll say H divide of 8, and then V divide of 4. And then so it's a nice simple cylinder, right? Make Polymesh 3D. I'm going to go in here and say ZModeler brush BZM, hover over an edge, insert multiple edge loops. Boom, boom. There we go. And then Control Shift drag over this top part, Control W, Control Shift drag over this bottom part, Control W. B, create insert mesh, new. So this is just an insert mesh, right? But now we know how to make IMM brushes because we just got to turn on curve mode, drag this out. Now we have a start, an end, and a repeating middle. However, I want these things to be welded together, so that's underneath brush, modifiers, and we'll say weld points. So now when I move this around, it's all welded up. So now I can go to my little thing here. If I want to, I can just use this tube to kind of just sit on top, and then we can tap S to update the size, and then we can just keep continue drawing things. I was hoping with snap turned on, curve mode as line. You can do as line if you want to make straight lines. That can come in handy sometimes. Anyway, if we wanted to follow this curve, we're going to frame the polygroups again. And if I tap here to update, it'll do fine, but it's not going to quite meet up, right? So if we go in here to our let's turn on, let's tap off to get our curve, rid of our curve, split mask points. And then again, instead of having an object that we're going to duplicate, now we have, if we get rid of those caps, delete hidden, we just have a gap. That's when you go into your ZModeler brush, hover over an edge, bridge, 2 holes. This spline is fine, just tap one edge. Let's go into solo mode so we can see this a little bit better. If you want to see both sides of your mesh to make it a little easier for selection, just go down here to display properties, turn on double, and then now you can just tap on one edge and then tap on the other. That'll bridge those 2 holes together. Doesn't matter what shape they are, it'll bridge it. And then if you need to, you could go in here and say insert single edge loop, get rid of this one if you want, but that one actually kind of works. Just hit Control W, and now you've got a contiguous shape that follows the flow of what you were working on. Okay. Have any tips for polygrouping anatomy on human models? Best way to dice up the model to make life easier later on, that kind of thing. Kind of. Yeah, I do. Well, the easy part is usually, let's grab a body. Hey, I got a body here. We got Walton Goggins' body. Nice. So if we alt tap his body, let's go out of Polypaint mode here, and let's check out old Walton here. Sorry, Walton. Down to your skivvies. So now we've got like subdivision level 1, subdivision level 6, and we want to ZRemesh this. Let's say this is just a Dynamesh result, and we want to go through and make polygroups so that we can have nice edge loops for facial animation and body animation using ZRemesher to kind of get it done quick and dirty. Now, before I get too far into this, let me do a quick look. I want to say it was fairly recent, although I haven't been streaming that much. So when I say recent, I really just mean like months ago. It was literally, let's do a search. Polygroups. This one, the ZRemesh auto retopologize your mesh for facial anatomy, is what I was kind of thinking of, but I know I made a better one. I think, or at least I named it better so that people could find it better. There it is, ZBrush topology, face, body, whatever. Hey, you know, I think I may include the body, although I think it's mostly facial face talk about. So it does go through like polygroups and ZRemesher, and then how to clean up some of that geometry if you ever need to. And then body. Oh, it does go into body. And then also, okay, this one covers a lot. Share, copy, check this one out. That'll walk you through dividing that up. Long story short, really it is. If we just go through here, let me see. Let me just do this real quick. So you can, if you want to Dynamesh at a particular resolution, you can drag from your resolution slider onto your object, and it'll pick the resolution for you. If you want to go lower, you can just drag that down, and then in this case, we'll just Dynamesh this. No to free subdivisions. X symmetry on. We'll just say geometry modified topology mirror and weld. We got layers apparently. Bake all. Mirror and weld. Multiple subdivisions. Let's get rid of those. Well, delete lower, and then Dynamesh. The result, there you go. So now it's just Dynamesh, Control W, I think. Is it Dynamesh? No, it's not. Dynamesh. Mask must be cleared. Didn't know it was mask. Sorry about that. Okay, now it's just a Dynamesh mesh. Control W, no polygroups, no nothing. So I'm going to go turn on polyframe, turn off line, and we'll switch over to like a skin shader so we can see a little bit better. And at this point, you can go through and you can just kind of have X symmetry on. You can go through and mask different areas, and then you can hit Control W. That'll give you like an alias line through here. You can see this. Let's make that a little more obvious. I don't know. You can see that. So if you go through here, multiple ways to clean this up. One way is a cool way. If you go in here to brush, all the cool kids do it this way. Smooth brush modifier, hold down shift and then switch this to 6. If you hover over this, you'll see that's group's border. You can literally just go in here and it'll just smooth that group's border for you. This is important because when you ZRemesh something, ZRemesh is going to want to build in this aliasing because it thinks you want it because it's sitting there. Now, if you want to do that a little bit faster, if you want to, like, put a edge ring around the lips, obviously. One way you can do that is go in here to geometry, edge loop. You can say edge loop mask border. That'll slice through kind of a blurry mask and give you a pretty clean line. So that's one way. Let's go ahead and do that. And then for things like this, where you can just go through and you can slice. You can just like slice along the top of the neck here. Oops, I probably should have done it the other way. Control Shift Tap and then slice through, and then we can do the top of the neck, and then we can do the bottom, and then you can go through there. You can mask along the arm if you want to do that. If you hold down Control, you'll see the new transpose does a very soft fall off. If you want to go back to classic, that's BTC. That is transpose classic, and then now you'll get a harder, sharper fall off. Anyway, you can Control drag down to, make a mask. It's Control W or whatever, or use this as a starting point and then go through here and start, continue masking and refining this mask. So just real quick, if we go through here and we say, okay, Control W and then Control Shift Tap to isolate, you can do it with visibility. We're going to make some aliased lines here. We'll say Control W. Now, if you want to clean up all your lines at once, one easy way to do that is underneath masking. We can say mask or mask by feature groups. Just tap that. That'll mask all of your polygroup borders. I like to do a little grow mask just to kind of, grow the mask. Control tap to invert that, or go in here and hit the invert button wherever that is. And then deformation, polish by feature. I like to do open circle. That'll really polish it. Closed circle maintains your volumes. Open circle just polishes the hell out of your object. It's something this high poly. Open circle's fine. And then we'll just tap that a few times. Just tap, tap, tap. And that'll smooth out your line. And now you've got polygroups set up so that you can ZRemesh and project back to success. Seems like there was something else I wanted to talk about, but I don't remember. Anyway, that video I sent should give you good stuff. Hope you're fine with all that's happening globally. It's fine as I can be. Not fine, but what can you do? Vote. Just one question. I am trying human anatomy now, and stuck in the face. I remember you told me how much you used to practice. I mean, honestly, I wish I practiced more. If I was really smart when I was a kid, I would have practiced so much drawing of primitives and drawing of anatomy. And because when you talk about studying anatomy, it's not just like, hey, go grab a Bridgman book, redraw the Bridgman stuff, boom, anatomy. Some people can do that. I was not one of them. I drew those things, and then nothing really stuck with me in any meaningful way. So for me to study something, I usually have to do something really gross. I'll show you this. Actually, let me pop this open because I will need this later if we're going to talk about what I want to talk about, which is folding clothes, the most exciting thing you can do in CG. It's interesting, I think. I thought it was cool in a weird way. What was I doing? Oh, so for example, I don't have any. Let me see if I can find one that's reasonable. Yeah, okay. So, for instance, if I'm going to, oh no, this is the wrong one. Damn, it's all my work stuff. Yeah, that's fine. So if I'm going to learn something, and let's say what I'm going to learn is like a, character creator, if I'm going to really study that, I got to go in and I got to look at the documentation. I got to write everything down. I got to watch a bunch of videos. Same thing for anatomy. If I'm going to really study anatomy, for me to get it, I would have to do something like this, where I go through a bunch of videos and I take a lot of notes and I do a ton of drawings and I compare, how some people attack making a pelvis versus other people, and how manga artists do it versus traditionally trained whatever versus comic book artists versus taking all of those things and making sense of it and then drilling it into my brain over and over and over again until it's muscle memory, basically. And then I will have studied it enough to be competent in it, and then I can take this, in this case I can take all that data and I can funnel it down, and then I can make it ways where my brain can digest that data. If I don't do that, then it's just, and if you want more on anatomy stuff, facial anatomy, take anatomy classes. Even when I'm doing anatomy, like if I'm doing Scott Eaton anatomy, I'll use ZBrush. So anatomy, we talk about this quite a bit, but if you just type in anatomy here, this 3D and 2D and back again anatomy, vampire anatomy, écorché, that's kind of a fun one, body blockout. So I talk about scan data and using ZBrush as a crutch or as a addition to whatever you're studying. You can use ZBrush as a really fun, cool, interesting way to let me find my spot here. Yes, that's what I need. There we go. Just a few notes, because my brain ain't what it used to be, folks. Never was much. I think I used most of my brain power when I was like working at Dairy Queen and Whataburger when I was a teen. It's all been downhill from here. Anyway, practicing, but there's very little progress. Can you buy something that'd be a big help? So that would be for the way my brain works and getting progress. You got to do what works for you. And unfortunately, what works for me is really detailed notes from various sources. And then when it comes to if you want to draw anatomy or sculpt anatomy, drawing that anatomy a lot from every angle, or sculpting that anatomy a lot from every angle, sculpting from scratch, using scan data to, tweak, like kind of look at what I did and then look at something that's real and be like, oh, where did I get it right? Where did I get it wrong? If I'm exaggerating shapes, getting resources for that so I can say, hey, this is how these artists, now let me see, artists. Once I get to a point, if I go in here and say, hey, how do these artists tackle anatomy? So we'll go type in, of course, like Jordu Shell or Andy Bergholtz or Simon Lee or whatever, and just kind of look at how they kind of brought something to life with a little bit of not just anatomy, where it's like, hey, here's a 35-year-old white guy superhero, which is all I usually end up drawing because that's what I look like. I'm a little older than 35 now, and I don't look like a superhero, but you get the idea. Giving your characters some personality, having different body types and surface anatomy is super important too. So not just the écorché guy, muscle guy with no fat on him, but like fat deposits are so fun. Surface anatomy is so fun. Skin does so much cool stuff, especially in the face, So find a resource that works for you. One resource that worked for me was Scott Eaton, because and it may not be for everybody, but for me, it was so explicit, and that's what I needed. Some people don't need explicit. Some people are like, no, just give me the Bridgman stuff. I'll figure out why these shapes and these lines are important and speak to the, how a body works and the motion and the volumes and all that stuff and the weight. I didn't really appreciate Bridgman until I did the really explicit medical anatomy study. And then I was able to go back and go, okay, this is why this is this, and this is why those lines are meaningful. And that's the shorthand for explaining this. Now I kind of get it. Bing, lights go off. You feel good. Some people don't need it. Unfortunately, I do. You might also as well. So practice a lot, draw a lot, never stop, start early. Don't be like me. When placing an IMM, are there other ways to get them direction? Yeah, and in fact, you will come up on some issues. Let's see, make Polymesh 30F here. Here's an interesting one. So I like to go in here and I'll say group by normals, and that'll just give me normals on all the sides, just because I like to look at them. So now, BI, brush insert. We can go in here to like industrial parts here, hit M, and we want to put, flathead screws on here. Now, where things can get a little wacky is if we hit Y on our keyboard, this is our transpose line. And right now, our transpose line actually kind of dictates direction. So if I was to go through here, let me see if I can get this to work, and just kind of put a transpose line like that, and then hop back into my gizmo, and then go in here and drag out another flathead screw. Let me see if I can get this to work. Actually, what I really need to do is be like, let me see, IMM. Instead of trying to reproduce this, here's me. This is the kind of thing where I'm like, no, IMM axis orientation snapping. This is where things can get a little bit tricky. And it will also go into the picker. So I'll give you this resource. This will tell you a lot about IMM and direction of IMM. The short story is, and that'll actually be a lot of problem solving because it's actually resetting itself fine. Let me do this. Let me say, yes, I'm dragging and it's following the surface normal. However, if I go in here, Control Shift Knife, Q, surface normal. Trying to break it and it's not breaking. It's usually the opposite. It's like, if I know how to break it, I expect you to break. And you're being good at your job, man. Anyway, watch that video. I'll give you a lot of information on IMM. If you are so inclined, you can go in here to your picker. The not oft used picker not a lot of people go in here. It's kind of powerful. So right now it's following the surface normal. If you want it to just look straight at you, there's this little box in here. If you just tap it, that'll turn that box on. And then now it's going to look straight at the camera. And it's like, well, cool, but what is this? Well, if you click and drag, you'll see it's an arrow. So if you want on the wall kind of look up to the right when you drag, you can turn that on, and that'll kind of freeze it in that position. But if you want to look right at you, you can toggle this. We'll do once orientation, then we'll toggle that back on. And then now, no matter where I am, it'll always look straight at me. It'll stick to the surface wherever you click, but it'll always look right at the camera. So that's one way. If you want to make everything the same size, just make your brush size the right size, then hold down Control as you drag out, and then it'll always be a consistent brush size. And in fact, now that I say that, ZBrush plugins, if we go to Google ZBrush plugins, click the link. Don't click on any links that take you and ask you for your credit card information and it has exe files. So be careful about what you're clicking on the internet. This one's pretty safe. ZBrush plugin, ZBrush compositor, quick scaler. There is one in here that is IM extractor's cool. Dynamesh utility's cool. Gizmo swapper, keyshot, turntable. IMM draw size. So you can actually use this plugin to give you a millimeter size, specific size in millimeters for your IMM parts. So how cool is that? Does that make sense? And if I miss a question, it's not because I hate you. It's because my eyes are bad. And so just keep shouting it out. New to ZModeler, where can I start learning ZModeler in the best way? I'm not going to give you the best way because I don't know what that is. I can give you some resources. I know where they are. One way you can start is if you go here to the playlists. I'll give you two ways to start. Here's an intro to ZBrush. If you go in here and you view this playlist, this will walk you through how to get started in ZBrush. And in here is a bunch of videos on ZModeler actions, polygon, edge, point, and subdivisions and creasing. So in there is a few videos on ZModeler that'll kind of get you caught up. At least the basics. Trying to think if there's some other cool ZModeler stuff you can do. ZBrush, what's new? Extrude edge retopology techniques is really neat with ZModeler brush. So you can just type in ZModeler into my channel. You don't have to go to my channel. I'm sure there's absolutely better instructors than me. But this is what I know where it is, so I'm going to use it. Also, if you go in here to the ArtStation, my ArtStation ZBrush What's New section, there's your intro to ZBrush, and then you have the ZBrush 2024, 2023, 2022, 2021 broken down into different sections, 2020, 19, all the way back to ZBrush 4.8 of all the functionality. You can just click in here, go to the upper right. Here's 16 videos on 2022, or I guess it is 16. 2022 functionality. So this will also get you pretty caught up to a bunch of functionality in there if it's useful to you. cool stuff in there. It's all this all just points back to my YouTube channel. It's just a little easier to look at and find things. Whereas on here, you go in here to playlist, and it's just kind of like, I mean, on home, there are ZBrush What's New playlist right here. But if you're just in the playlist section, it's a little overwhelming, but it's all in there. It is tough. Hey, John, how's it going? Yeah, can you also show how to tie a knot? Yeah, I want to say this comes up a bit. Let me see. Do I have one for this? I guess not. If I'm doing a knot, for example, doing a Ninja Turtle, and I'm doing wraps, or I'm doing like, you know, this little belt knot or the knot that goes in the back of the head and stuff like that. Probably what I'm going to do is something like this, where I just take, you know, a little half noodle and I say split mask points, control drag it up, move it over here, control drag this over, move it over here, make it look like it's kind of a knot, but it's not. But you can go through here and you can say, you know, inflate or whatever. And, you know, again, then you just use this as an IMN brush. Say B, create insert mesh, new. And if you want it from all angles, and you got a little knot that you can put on things. If you do want it from all angles, this would be where like BI brush. Let's do this. I'm just going to go to my custom, just a ring here. We'll say split mask points, and we'll say deformation, inflate, and then W, control drag out. We'll go here and then control. This isn't really answering your question. Actually, I know where I got knots. I know where knots are. I know. Shoe. You know what has knots? Shoelaces. You know what has laces? Shoes. Go in here and type in shoe. I'm almost positive we talk about knots in this make a shoe stuff. These maybe not the Jordans, but I think this thing here. Anyway, this is generally how I would go through and make like an all-purpose knot brush. In fact, I'm almost positive I do have a knot brush with varying degrees of this setup. So just going through here and shoop, and there you go. Now you've got, again, B, create insert mesh, new. Now you've got a knot that you can apply to anything, and just go through here and drag two knots, or again, hold down control. And if you want it to embed further, that's under the brush depth. You can just take this embed down or just drag this around, and then as you drag out, it'll be a little more embedded. So again, we'll set that to 0. There we go. Knot. Now, if you want to really tie a knot, probably the easiest way is to go through here with like Z-spheres. Just drag a Z-sphere out, edit mode. Don't need to make it a Polymesh 3D. It's not going to happen. And then you can E to scale it down, Q to go into draw mode, Shift to snap it to the exact same size as the previous one. And then you can go through here and just tie this into a knot, and then you can use this. So it's like this will go over, under, and then now if you ever mess up and you're like Q and you just drag out a smaller one, don't worry about that. We can fix that. That's not a big deal. So we'll go through here. I'll show you how in a second. So here, Q, drag, whoop, over here, and then Q, whoop, over here, and then Q to add a few more points, beep, beep, and then W, and then rotate this around. So this is how you can go through and just make, you know, tie this thing into whatever shape that you want. And then if you want the geometry, easy way to do that, a couple different cool things you can do with this now. This is a controlling curves moment. This is built in now. So if we go over here to our transform, and you're like, okay, this is great, but I want to make a bracelet and tie it in a knot. Well, this is where you can go in here to, no, it's not under transform, it's under stroke. Come on, Mike. Curves helper at the bottom of the stroke menu. You can say copy Z-sphere chain, and then you can say create curve append new. That'll give you a little box with a curve, and then you can go in here to, again, BI brush insert IMM curve M necklace, and then go through here, and we'll make our draw size a little bigger, and there we go. Now we've got our necklace tied in a knot. That's one way you can use curves. The way I prefer is to take my Z-spheres, go down here to adaptive skin. If we tap A on our keyboard, that'll show you an adaptive skin preview, and it's going to be all Dynameshy and weird. Turn Dynamesh down to 0, turn density down to 1. You can tap A to go back into preview mode. I mean, you could tap density of 2 if you want, but I prefer density of 1. And now I've got geometry. Now it will let you go through here and sculpt geometry. Just be careful, because as soon as you hit A again, goes back to Z-sphere. So if you want this to be real geometry it's just geometry, not Z-sphere attached, say make adaptive skin. That'll throw a little skin Z-sphere here out in the void of your palette. So if you wanted to bring that into, you know, a stack of awesome subtools, we can go in here to subtool and just hit append, and then we'll just grab that skin Z-sphere that it made. Now that we have this, back to originally, remember that IMM discussion we were having, we now have a path of geometry. So we can hold down Control Shift, go in here to select lasso. I like to pop these little caps, not popping caps, removing the end caps from this tube, and then Geometry Modify Topology Delete Hidden. You'll also notice kind of goes straight. It's very rectilinear, I guess you'd call that. I'm gonna hit Control W, make it all one polygroup, and then use our trusty deformation. I keep saying it, but I'll show you. Deformation, polish by feature. Again, closed circle is going to respect the volumes. So see how it kind of stays rectilinear? I'd rather just smooth the hell out of it. Open circle, tap, tap, tap. Whoa! Boy, it got super smooth, which is its job. Maybe a little too fast, so maybe we just go in here and just tap once, twice. There you go. Kind of smooth it out. If you do go too far, just remember you can go into deformation, inflate. Just inflate it back up. So now you've got a nice smooth curve. If you want to tweak this curve, go in here to Move Brush, Auto. We need brush settings, don't we? Auto masking. Down here under topological, you know, maybe change that range down to like 1.5 or something. And then we go through here and you can just kind of move this piece separate from the other pieces. Just go through here and kind of tuck these in at night. Read them an old bedtime story. And now you've got your little knot tied. Now, this could just be, you're done. So then you could go in here to your ZModeler brush and say close, convex hole, blop, bloop, Control Shift tap, and then now you've got, you know, whatever. You could also, if you don't cap it off, you can go through here and you can say polygroup, polyloop, just tap, alt, Control Shift tap between these two to grab both polygroups, Geometry Modify Topology, Delete Hidden. Wait, we have a path with a polygroup border. We know what that means. Stroke, curve, frame our polygroup mesh, I brush insert, IMM army curve, bike chain, doo-doo-doo. Now we have a bike chain tied in a knot that we can now go in here and we can say, you know what, let's delete that curve function. We'll go ahead and say split mass points. And now we have our bike chain knot path on that path that we made. Oh, wait, did I miss one? Oh, I might have missed one. Highly detailed tire. The idea is to model one line and then attach them together to complete the tire. Problem is when I use ZRemesher, the top and bottom of my model don't match. I have to manually stitch and match a lot of polygons. It's a faster way to do this. Yeah, maybe. So let me go into my comma key. Now let me do this. Ha ha ha. I knew it. I think I got something. Let me see if oh, I did. Oh, wait. Why is that one not highlighted? Tire, array mesh tire, IMM tire creation, tire low res text on a path. I want to make sure. So this is kind of going through and making a tire. Okay, good. I do talk about it. So there is a brush that you can make. Oh, that's the Remesh, sorry. Do I talk about it? Do I talk about it? Sorry, let me make this a little bigger. Yes. Okay, so there is so just like we were doing, okay, I'll just show you. But anyway, just so you have it available to you. It's so cool that when, let me see, array mesh tire, detail tire rotation. Somewhere starting about here-ish, let's say share, start at, copy, is a bunch of tire stuff. But the cool thing about how it ties into what we've been talking about is if we go in here to cylinder, let's say, and we say make polymesh 3D so we can sculpt on it. Let me get this mic out of my face. I'm afraid we got some Sahara sand or allergies or something in Austin that's making me a little dry. Maybe it's my cold brew, but hopefully I'm not smacking too hard into that mic. But anyway, let's go in here. Let's hit W. There's a cool extender in here. You can say extender, and so you can extend this out. And then again, we have, we can hold down shift and go around this object, or we can make a path. However, if we go into comma key, brush, where would I have put it? IMM, just IMM stuff that I collect through the years. This is on the, like the ZBrush. If you Google ZBrush repository thread, there's some of this stuff, and I think this is where I grab these tires. So somebody, I wish I knew who. Let me see if it's in this. No, it doesn't have it. Somebody awesome made these IMM brushes. So basically, if you hold down shift and it goes, okay, if you hold down shift and it goes around the object, there's your tire. And you started with one little strip, and it just repeats that strip around and then connects back up. If you want to make it, you know, Z intensity, you can just drop that Z intensity down and it'll make it a little more lower profile. Crank it up. If you want to over crank it, that's when you have to go in here to brush modifiers and say strength multiplier of like 2.5. Now you got monster truck tires. Of course, if, you know, I like to stretch the shape out just because it's more interesting. Of course, you probably just want to put it around something like this. So we can hold down Alt and then scale along those axes if you want, and then go back in here and swoop it around, and then we'll drop this back down to 1. So that's one way to do it, but that video will have a whole bunch more tire stuff in it. I'm doing good. Thank you, Luck Lori. Is there a way to copy a pattern from one part of a 3D model to another, some of the stamps tool in Photoshop, for instance, if I smooth out a section? How can I easily restore the original pattern? Yeah. That would be called Extractor. Let me see if I can find it. It was like cleanup extractor. Extractor drag dot for scan data cleanup. So this is one example of using the extractor brush to go in and sample. So like, let's say you have the, like you said, a smooth, just smooth areas of mesh with no texture, no sculpted information. You can go to this side and you can do the extractor brush just along this surface, and that will pick up the texture detail and the sculpted detail. Boop, it'll capture it as an alpha and a texture, and then you can just continue to use that brush to kind of stamp on the other side. It doesn't have to be a drag dot stroke. It can be a drag rect stroke, or yeah, drag dot stroke, drag rect stroke, the dot. So here we are, like, you know, you sample from another area and then you just go in here and you stamp it onto another area. And it's not only texture, but also the 3D stuff packed into that alpha map. So check this out. Extractor. Yeah, scan data. The poor scan data people, they gotta wear that little apparatus. I don't know. I kind of want to scan myself someday, but I'd be horrified if it ever got out. Studying method. Oh, it's like this, or something that pushed you to refine to what it's something that was pushed to refine to what I have now. And again, I don't know if it's because my brain got worse, but I started realizing, I think what it is because I'm a mile wide and an inch deep. I'm not really great at anything in particular, but I do a lot of stuff. So in order for me to do something and then be like, oh, I'm not going to do mocap for a while, so I'll learn a bunch of mocap and animation and all that type of thing, and then I'll go do something else for months or years, and then if I go back, I will have forgotten 99% of it. Same thing with anatomy. If I will study anatomy a lot, I'll retain a certain percentage, and then if I don't do it for a while, I don't keep it. You know, some of the stuff I do keep over time. Every time I study anatomy, I'll retain an extra like 2%. So over 20 years, I'm up to like 17% retention in my brain, where I'm kind of like, okay, this shape isn't right, and these volumes aren't right, and these proportions aren't right, because it's finally been ingrained over the years. But I should have studied harder, and then to get to the point where it really sticks in my brain. Knowing how you stick things in your brain is really important. And even at crochet, it's like I will get like the big crochet statue and be like, oh, I finally bought one. Now I'm going to be an amazing anatomy person, and it's like, nah, not I won't. You know, just having it around is like, okay, I have something to observe, and that's definitely helpful. But as far as the understanding of, and in not just understanding, but also putting it in your brain, so you don't necessarily have to have it sitting there. You know, it's nice to have a thing sitting there so you can do it and then compare it to what's been done and be like, oh, this is where I got it wrong. This is what I need to adjust, and then that kind of sticks it in your brain better. Also, so taking notes and doing sticks things in your brain. Teaching sticks things in your brain because you really have to sit down and do it and then understand it and then tell somebody else how to do it. And then recording a video helps. So doing a YouTube channel helps kind of stick it in your brain. This is why I mean, I'm kind of a bad example where I'm like, oh, how do I do this again? Let me go look it up. But a lot of the stuff I've been talking about is stuck in my brain, right? Because I've done videos on it, and then also live streaming sticks it in your brain, because if you're going to live stream a topic, you can't be fumbling around and being like, oh, I'm going to edit this out later, because you're live. So that'll get the sweat going, and I don't know, live stream your anatomy. Teach people anatomy on your live stream, and you'll probably get pretty good, because it's going to sweat. It's going to sweat you. Will ZRemesh have color dodge for Polypaint mode? Oh, I don't know. That'd be, yeah. So for y'all that don't know, if we go in here to make Polymesh 3D, you can go through here and you can polypaint. So we'll say skin shader, and we'll say I have a Control Alt F as color fill object. So if we go through here and we say, okay, here's baby blue, and we want to go through and turn on RGB for a standard brush, we can paint, right? We can also go down here to our brush settings, and in here is alpha and texture, and in here is a polypaint mode. So if you switch this to, say, colorize, you can go through, I don't know if that's going to be a great example. Let me pick an obvious one like multiply. Multiply is 3. So if you set this to multiply, all of a sudden, is that even working that well? Let me see. It has to be darker. And then if we switch this back to 1, I guess it is a little different. Switch this to dark blue, and then 3 is multiply. Kind of hard to tell. Drop the RGB intensity down. Anyway, oh, there we go. Okay, so you can paint in different modes. All you gotta do is go in here to the polypaint mode and switch it. So lighten, do lighten. There we go. So now you can see the difference. When they're going to implement that, I couldn't tell you, but maybe they're listening. You have a favorite non-standard plugin you use regularly and or a brush you swear by? Also, any plugins you feel are must-haves for any modeler? Let's take a look at my plugins. Do I? I like the Clean Tool utility. So if I'm going through and I want to make sure, hey, I need to, I'm going into, I'm going to transpose multiple something. I want to make sure all my masks are off. Go in here and clear my masks. Or I got a bunch of objects in here. My file seems like it's taking a long time to save. My file size is really bloated. I can go in here and say, hey, I don't care about UVs right now. If my objects accidentally have UVs and I've subdivided a bunch, that takes up a ton of memory. Delete UVs all. It'll go through and delete your entire subtool stack. All the UVs. It'll show hidden. That can get you into trouble sometimes if you got a hidden piece of a mesh and you'll get errors thrown up like, hey, I can't do that operation. You have hidden polygons. You can say show hidden all. Clear mask, delete UVs, all in one fell swoop. Now you can mimic that behavior with ZRepeat. That's another plugin. So you can go through here. This is like in Photoshop. You can say record new, like recording a macro. You can hit record, do a bunch of operations, say end record, name it, and then you can go through here and have, you can have a little script that it'll run on selected, visible, or all, or folder for your stack here. I personally, Bevel Pro is pretty cool. I don't use it a ton, but it's neat. Maya Blend Shapes, I have a video on that if you're into that. I have a bunch of character creator stuff. That's on my YouTube channel if you're into character stuff. Clean Tool, yes. Decimation Master, obviously, but that comes with ZBrush. Dynamesh Utility is a good one. Let's talk about bounding box. This will be, so, and also working at scale. Sometimes that can get a little tricky, but you know, let's simplify this. So for example, if I want to hit the comma key and I want to go into tool and I want to say, you know, super average man, and we have our super average man here, and let's split his hands off here. Let's turn on X symmetry. We'll say split hidden. And then on his feet too, we'll say split hidden. So we got our super average man here, and I want to go through and I want to Dynamesh this. So we all know if we go down here to geometry and Dynamesh, this is the resolution. If you want to drag from the resolution slider on here, it'll pick the resolution. It'll kind of match it. So if I Dynamesh this at 72, I'm going to turn project off and blur down to 0. That'll give you kind of the same polygon size. If we keep that at 128, that's the result. And if we keep scaling this up, we're going to get more and more resolution, right? Now, if we have a foot down here, and we're like, okay, great, Dynamesh resolution at 128, project off. There we go. That's the result we're getting. And same thing for the hands. If we go up here to these hands and we say Dynamesh at 128, that's the result we're getting. However, it is looking at the bounding box, and it's also a scale-based thing. Let me explain this real quick. Append a cube. So we have a cube here, and on this cube, we're going to Dynamesh this at let's make this 24. So this is a 24 cube, and if we hold down Control and drag off a copy, we make it smaller, and then we Dynamesh the result of these. This cube and this cube have the exact same Dynamesh resolution. That makes sense, right? However, if you were to do something like this, where it's like, hey, I want to make a smiley face, and this is obvious, but let me explain it. I want to make a smiley face on this face. Okay, I can kind of see it. If I try to make that same smiley face over here, there's not enough resolution. Even though technically they're the same resolution for Dynamesh, well, one object's smaller, so it's not going to hold as many polygons as a larger object, right? That just makes good sense. So that's number one, is Dynamesh is scale-based. The bigger your object, the more, even with the resolution slider low, if I, in fact, if I scale all of this up and we keep that resolution at 24, look at that. Hey, now I've got a lot more resolution. So now over here, I can go in here and say, sculpt a pretty detailed face on here, because even though the resolution is still at 24, the object has been scaled up. Dynamesh resolution hasn't changed. I can just pack more geometry in here. Now on the opposite end, if I scale these way down, go into solo mode, and I keep it at 24 and I re-Dynamesh, there's no resolution, right? And in fact, you may get to the point where you Dynamesh resolution up to, let's see, Dynamesh. Okay. Let's make it even smaller then. I'm going to see if I can crash ZBrush. There we go. So I am capped out at 4096. It is just, this thing is too small. No matter what I do, I can't get a higher resolution than this. Now for me, it's not a crazy deal, because look how good I can sculpt at this resolution. This is a work of art. For other people that aren't amazing as me, they may struggle without the lack of resolution here. So I'm just kidding. This is garbage, obviously. But if 4096 resolution, if I need more resolution with very small objects, and you may run into this if you have a whole human and then you want to make like a little skull earring, and you're like, well, I'm capped out. Like, I can't get any more resolution here. That's where you go over here to this little button and you go boop, make it open circle. Be very careful with this. Don't just be like, okay, great, Dynamesh. Drag this all the way back down, and then Dynamesh, and be like, okay, that was not enough. Let's crank it up just a little more. Okay, a little more. There we go. 248 gives me plenty of resolution. Now imagine if I was at 4096, I would be at like 20 million polygons. So just be careful with that. Now you also might see, hey, I'm working at such a small scale that my draw size can't even get small enough. That's where you need to go in here to your preferences menu, go in here to draw. Your max brush scale is at 1000. Your dynamic brush scale is like a multiplier. You can actually do the inverse. You can say 0.25, and now you can make your brush size smaller, and also the opposite. So if we go back to our Walton here, and I go here and I try to make my brush size super huge, it caps out. There it is at 1000, but it's still super tiny, right? So if I go in here and say, if we set this dynamic brush scale back to 1, okay, great, but I'm still capped out here. In a pinch, you can go up here and just double click dynamic, and that will turn this off. But dynamic is useful for, like, if you want to insert IMM brushes and have them, if you're zoomed out and you do an IMM brush, let me see, is this Dynamesh still? Yes. So, So for example, with Dynamesh off, yes, I can now make my brush size like normal. But if I'm doing like an IMM brush and I hold down Control and snap it to the size, and then I back my brush out, and then I hold down Control, and then I zoom in and I hold down Control, my sizes are all over the place, right? So dynamic is useful to have on, but if I do that, now it's again capped out. So you can go in here and you can make your max brush size 5,000, get a little bit more. You can change your dynamic brush scale to like double it. So now you can start getting, change that to 5 or whatever. So now you can start getting back to normal. Alternative, you can go in here to Z plugin. So Scale Master does come with ZBrush, but I enjoy using it. Scale Master is useful for especially if you're making things to a certain scale and you're like, hey, I need to make a can of green beans and I need it to be 4 inches tall, or however many centimeters tall, or millimeters or feet or whatever. You can go in here and you can make a new, all you got to do is click this little sub. This will take you to a video. This will explain how it works. But you can go in here and dial that in, and then you can just match the bounding box scale that you create. You can also go in here to ZBrush Scale Unify, and that will knock all of your subtools down so that they kind of fit within a ZBrush cube. So if you append a cube to this, the bounding box will be pretty close. So if I take this, see if it's making me a liar. Yoink. Yeah, it'll fit them right in a ZBrush cube, basically. And now all of your brushes and all of the ZBrush settings, I don't have to go in here. I can put all this back to the defaults here. And now, and the resolution of Dynamesh will be forgiving, and I don't know, it'll just be a little more comfortable to work in ZBrush. So keep that in your back pocket. They can kind of mess with layers, so be very careful if you're, doing face tools or something like that. But for what it's worth. Anything else in there? Ref switcher. I use this all the time. When I'm doing, for example, now I just did a unify scale, so obviously his head should be down here. This was not crotch reference, but his head would be lined up here. In fact, if you want to see more about the ref switcher and how I use it for exactly this file, I got a few videos. In fact, the making of this ghoul was from a previous live stream right here, and a likeness. So here's hey, there's me talking about ref switcher for a likeness, and then here's me going through the Vault Tech suit. So, we can do this. If we go here, so if you go home, there is a section for live stream, all my live stream videos. But you kind of cycle through them right here. Let's go to playlists and let me look for the big blue genie. That's the real boss. There we go. And then in this playlist here is all my live streams, and then right at the top there. Oh, that's actually missing one. We'll have to go in and do that. Uploaded to RCShop Quick Sculpt for fun, and it got a lot more attention than the project I spent 2 months working on. It's pretty frustrating. Isn't that the worst? Where you're like, oh man, this thing I'm working on, countless times that's happened to me. Let me see if I can remember specifics, like where you work on something, you put your blood, sweat, and tears into it, you make something that you think is really compelling, and it just lands with a thud. Honestly, that happens more often than the opposite, which is like, hey, this will do really well, and it does. That's almost doesn't ever happen. The only one I was pretty sure, I was like, I think this Ninja Turtle will do all right. That was the only one I was pretty sure would do okay. The rest, anything else I've ever done in my entire life on ArtStation, and this isn't actually my professional work, this is like my live streams and then little extracurricular activities I do. I don't think I have any, I don't have very much professional stuff on here at all, my actual day-to-day 9-to-5 stuff. But yeah, you go in with an expectation that like, oh, this is going to take the world by storm, and then it doesn't do anything, and then you'll do something like this. I think this is my most popular Instagram post of all time, is this SpongeBob. And I almost didn't even bother posting this. I'm like, nobody cares. Like, it's fun and easy to make this stuff, but it's like, whatever, y'all know how to do this. And then I post this, and the algorithm picked up something. It was fun enough to watch, or something about this grab the right eyeballs, the color contrast, the warms and the cools, and something about it. I mean, it kind of makes sense if you squint your eyes. It's clickable. Now you can get gross with your clickability and be like, here's my stupid face. Here's a blurry image. Oh, are you gonna click it? Play the game. If that's what you need to do in order to get clicks, by all means, be gross about it. I kind of probably should do that more on my channel. I don't know. I feel like I don't know. I hate to kind of play that game, but at the end of the day, if it works, right? So, go for it. Yeah, I would say to your point, yes, that happens more often than not. How do you deal with socials? I wish I dealt with them better. I'm actually really terrible at it. I live stream like once a month. I should do it more. I post on Instagram whenever I think about it. I'm not even on TikTok, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, the usual suspects. I'm terrible at it. If I was smart, I would be doing fan art Patreon stuff and posting the socials every day, a little video, and then recycling that video for months, and then doing the stupid face thing with the blurry thing. If I was smart, that's what I would be doing. Playing the game in order to build momentum, build clicks, get your likes up, etc., etc. But it's kind of gross. It's never felt great to me, and it's always like, well, I could spend a lot of time doing that, but I kind of like to make things, and I'm kind of doing like a job over here and doing extracurricular activities over here. I just don't have time to think about, how should I recycle this stuff, and what's the optimal time for me to post this so I can get clicks. Again, if I was smart, I would do it. No one's ever accused me of being smart. So, the answer to the question, research what the best time is to post stuff. Get really good at video editing. DaVinci Resolve is a baller program. Do a quick intro guide, Casey Ferris type YouTube channel type thing. He'll walk you through it. Make stuff that's catchy, and that's another thing too, is if you go to ArtStation, look at trending and just kind of blur your eyes and see, number one, what's going to get clicks. Well, hard surface stuff. Here's some good contrast, lights and darks or warms and cools, good composition, good overall contrast for your image, something interesting. And, fan art doesn't hurt. Hard surface doesn't hurt. Cleavage doesn't hurt. Like orcs don't hurt, like all the things you can do that are going to get attention. If your main concern is likes, lean into it. Play the game, or just do what you want. Don't worry. Honestly, the real answer is don't worry about socials. I know it's easy to say, but because I don't know, opportunities can come from that. I'm an example of that too, but I don't know. Try not to let it get you too down. And if it helps you any, if you have any respect for me, or you think I don't go through that, I 100% go through the exact same thing you go through. So happens to the best of us. And also, if you're just starting out, even if you're crazy amazing and you've only got 50 followers, guess what? You're only going to get a handful of likes. Now, if it goes viral or it goes to the top page of whatever, then you'll get more, obviously. But just starting out, like, you're just not going to, the algorithm hasn't picked you up yet. So why would you expect to get a ton of likes based on something you post, unless you happen to get picked up somewhere somehow? Just like anatomy, just like studying, just like anything in this world, it's just repetition and just doing it and waking up and posting to socials and setting doing some studying and finding out what's effective and then sticking to it and making a schedule and blah, blah, blah. And then you'll succeed. Same thing with anything, I suppose. Is it possible to remove multiple edge loops when using ZModeler? Kind of. So yeah, let's do Shift Z. We'll turn off Rest Switcher. Awesome plugin. If we go over here to make a cylinder, go in here to edit mode. We can say make polymesh 3D, so we can sculpt on it. So ZModeler brush, you can go in here and say insert single edge loop, hold down Alt, and you can say, get rid of single edge loops like he said. But how would I get rid of all of those? The easy answer that may work in some situations is go through here and do edge loop and then do delete loops. That'll go through, and based on your angle threshold, delete polyloops. Now, if we do a sphere, for example, a little different shape, right? So if we go through here and we say delete loops, it's looking at these angle and aspect ratio and align loops, partial group. I want to say this aspect ratio is doing the heavy lifting. Or is it angle? There we go. So kind of a mix between angle and aspect ratio, but the lower that angle goes, the more it's going to try to build in the curvature. The higher the angle goes, the more it's going to just disregard the shape. So you can use this to kind of dial in, hey, I want to delete a lot of these, but not all of them, but I still want to retain the curvature. Delete loops, angle at 6.3. Boop, there you go. And that'll go through and delete loops. Now, is it going through and saying like, hey, I want to mark these for delete? Like, you know, select. Not really. I don't think you can. I mean, you can say like mask edge loop complete here. It's like we mask these edges, invert it. Is there a way for me to go delete? Something's tickling my brain. Something is like, there's something. I don't know about deleting, but I do think there's something interesting we could do here, but it's escaping me. Or something like new functionality that I'm not quite remembering all the way. Wow, was it a masking thing? Or was it like a repeat? It might have been like a repeat. I don't know. I don't know what my brain's doing right now. Too much cold brew. So to answer your question, no, I don't know that there's a way to do multiple edge loops in ZModeler, at least nothing that's coming to my brain. Insert or delete edge loop complete, edge loop partial, like deleting multiple at the same time. But you know, if you did just need to go through here, it's just a simple matter of like delete edge loop complete, boom, boom, boom. Tedious, but yeah, doing the automatic stuff with the delete loops is probably your best bet. Fingers crossed it works. Ever covered eyes, alien with black sclera, for example, and a brown iris. Not quite working on Paul, but something a little different that is currently causing a bit of pro. If I worked with you, I'd show you the model of concept art. I can't make extra opaque layer of the eye. I don't do a ton of eyes. Now, when it comes to modeling for the eye, there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of online tutorials of like, okay, let's make an eye. Let's go in here, we grab a sphere. I'm gonna go down here to initialize, and let's think about eyeballs. No, H divides. Let's make this a little simpler. 24 by 24. No, 24, there we go. Make Polymesh 3D. Let's say this part of the eye here. Switch back to select rectangle. This part of the eye here. Trying to think. Let's do this. I think this is the right way to go. Geometry modify topology, delete hidden. I'm going to go through here. We're going to say close convex hole with ZModeler brush over an edge. Do do, bing ding ding ding. So here is our little bump out, little eyeball thing. So we're going to go in here to subtool. We're going to duplicate this off, and then on the duplicate, we're going to say go into solo mode, get rid of this one, delete hidden. We're going to go down here to display properties, flip, and now we can say close convex hole the opposite direction. Do 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 do. And then we can flip that back, Control Shift Tap, Control W. So now we have our little goopy clear coat layer here. You can go through, I think it's Control. You can Control Scale, and that'll push along the surface normal. You can also go in here to like your ZModeler brush, say Q Mesh, all polygons, and you can just hold down Shift. And so basically what I'm doing is, if I hold down Shift and push in, these are just right on top of each other right now. So I'm going to make this a little larger just by pulling along the surface normal. So Extrude or Q Mesh, holding down Shift or holding down Control and doing this, or Deformation, Inflate. Any of those will push along the surface normal. So now we've got this here. Now, the problem with this, is we go in here to transparency mode, is, you know, rendering this in ZBrush is something you could do it. You could go in here and you could like turn on, if you want to do it in ZBrush, render, turn on redshift render, and then go in here and apply like a glass, what are these? Redshift Polypaint materials, redshift preset color materials, RS glass for this one. color, fill object, and then this one here can just be whatever. So now when I go and render this, it'll go through and do its rendering thing. It might smooth the normals. There's a way to turn that on in the BPR render as well. Let's let that do its thing. Alien with black sclera and a brown iris. That sounds, what was that, Paul, you said? Let me look at that eye. Paul Alien. You might need just a more general eye tutorial. That's where I would just be like, ZBrush eye. Because like I can walk you through how to kind of make the sculpt and then go in and paint it. These will be much better. Like outer eye, inner eye, they probably got rendering stuff, poly painting technique. Just what we kind of did here, a little less heavy-handed. Yeah, I wish I was your eye guy, but I don't know that I am. Oh, and it did its render thing. But anyway, I probably should have had a better eyeball inside, but I'll go ahead and turn that off. Interestingly enough, maybe if you go in here and do BPR, you'll see that you just get the faceted look. You can turn that off or do the whole, what is it called? Display properties, BPR settings. Where is it at? I thought it was in here. Transparent. Smooth normals is grayed out. I think under, maybe it's under the render settings here. Render properties. Smooth normals, turn that on. Okay, so if you turn on smooth normals in your render settings, that'll unlock this, and then you have some extra. But when you BPR render, that will give you, like, it's still fairly faceted because it is a low res object, but it'll smooth your normals on render. So if you're into that, use it, I suppose. Any idea if you'll make an anchor, so you can use it as a rig, anchor points or as opposed to, honestly, all I would need from ZBrush in order to do a tremendous amount of rigging. Oh, I need to go back and talk about this too, is a pivot point in a hierarchy. If I had a hierarchy in here and a pivot point that would stick, or I could attach to a subtool and move it where I wanted, with a pivot point and a hierarchy, I can do all sorts of damage. So as soon as I get that in ZBrush, oh man, it's on. Now, one thing I did want to say, so back to when we were talking about Dynamesh and scale resolution, it's a bounding box thing. So if I go down here again to the feet, let me just talk about this real quick. Go down here to the feet, and we say geometry, Dynamesh at 128. That's the result we're going to get. Same thing for the hands. Go up here, and we say Dynamesh resolution 128. That's what we get. However, if we say, hey, take these hands, take these feet, now the bounding box for this object is that big. It's not just around the hands or just around the feet. If I go down here and say Dynamesh resolution 128, is that the same? I want to say sometimes what will happen is this will get, your resolution will drop because your bounding box got bigger. So just keep that in mind. You can go through here and change the resolution to get the right resolution. Now, another thing you can do, going back to the Z plugin things we were talking about earlier, if you want to be really specific, like Dynamesh utility, I know I want this to be 700,000 polygons for this result. Go in here to additional options, turn on use autoscaler, hit Dynamesh, and that will give you as close as it can figure, or it should, to 0.7 of a million is 700,000. Didn't quite do that, did it? I wonder, Dynamesh, that should have done it. But it didn't. Anyway, sometimes you can use Dynamesh utility plugin to be a little more accurate, or and also do a couple more cool things in here. Let me turn that off. Let me see. I don't know. I got closer. I wonder if the bounding box is throwing it off. Huh. I don't know. That's weird. Interesting. But to answer your question, I have no idea. I don't work for ZBrush. I just do live streams. Is there a way I can instance a subtool using another subtool as a pivot point. Yeah. Ugh. This is one of those things. It's not as easy as another, 3D programs. If you do want to look at, if you're trying to align, anybody stopping by, if you're trying to align stuff, there's Z snapping and snap components, ZBrush snap components to Ebgen objects. Align and distribute objects is a 2022 update, so you can go through and align, and you can. Yeah, there's ways to do it. I don't do it very often. So like if I have this here, oh, here's a cool thing. So sometimes what can happen is you'll get this result where all of a sudden your transpose starts getting Gumby. Just change your focal shift down to -100, and that'll keep it rigid. That's as by design. So if we say I want this object to be the pivot of that one, that would just be a matter of like unmask that one, go to unmask mesh center, and then unmask everything, and now your pivot is based on that object. Now, to your point, it is a separate subtool. So if you're able to temporarily combine some tools, and then you go over here and say like split, group split's not going to work. Split the parts. If you split them, but you set it to this one originally, this one will inherit the pivot point. So that pivot doesn't change when you split them out. So for example, if this is centered and this is centered, and you're like, oh, I wish this one had the pivot of this one. If you can temporarily merge them down. And then, like I said, if this pivot is just in the middle of nowhere, just be like, hey, I want it to be centered on that, and I want it to be reset the world, just reset it. And then I want to say split mask points, and now this pivot is there, and then this pivot is also there. If you're doing a Remesh, you can kind of set pivots with transpose, but I don't know if that's really what you're asking. If you can't, I'm trying to think. If you can't, it's like, okay, here's my pivot, and you can't alt-tap here, but you can. Yeah. Honestly, I think the easiest way is if you can combine them, because then it's really easy to just, like I said, you can pick whatever pivot you want, just W, alt-tap on there, and then split the parts or whatever. Or if you have something masked, split unmask points. And then now your pivot's where you would expect. Wish I had a better answer. There might, there might be a plugin for that that's actually better. In fact, I'm almost positive there is, but I don't know what it is. Maybe in the downloads. Anybody that knows, shout it out. I can't know everything. What do you recommend for getting used to sculpting in planes? Often I default to smoothing every stroke I make, and everything turns into a blob. Okay, yeah, so for like sculpting volumes, for example, if we're back on this guy's face here, and we say mirrored well, then we say here. So to your point, you're going through here and you're sculpting and you're smoothing, and next thing you know, everything kind of, oops, we still have it on 6, don't we? Shifts, alpha and texture. Boy, we open a lot of stuff. Smooth brush modifiers, weighted smooth mode. I always set this to 1, smooth stronger, and then I just hold down shift and drop my Z intensity down if I need to. So for instance, you're going through here and you're sculpting. So what I do, if I want to make planes of the face, for example, I'll go in here with, like, say, my Damien standard brush, and I'll carve in those, and then I'll hold down Alt, and I'll carve out. And so this will kind of give me my border. And then through here, I'll go in with my clay brush, or clay tubes, or clay buildup, whatever you want to use. Boy, hold on just a second. I seem a little heavier handed than usual. So let's pull this down just a tad. There we go. Okay, so we want to do planes of the face. That's how I do it. I would just go through here with my Damien standard brush. I would carve in, maybe a little heavier on the corners of the mouth, and then a little lighter as it comes forward, and then hold down Alt, and then we'll pull out the lip here, and then we'll pull out the lip here, and then we'll push in here, and then maybe we'll carve in here, and then maybe I'll go in with my clay brush or clay buildup brush. So, a little bit of clay buildup or a little bit of clay to kind of go through and kind of build up to those crispy edges, and then go in with my H polish brush, and then I'll polish down. I'll hold down Alt. When you're in these tight spots right here, let's actually grab that nose too. Here, and then we'll carve in, and then carve in, and then we'll carve out. and then and you don't have to build up. You can go into your H-polish brush and just hold down Alt. I like to over crank my size just a bit, and then that way you can just go through here and just kind of polish. You hold down Alt to polish out towards you, and then let go of Alt to kind of polish down in, and then in these tight spaces, holding down Alt will get you to kind of polish towards that kind of creased area in there. So now this way, and this is kind of a hard surface armor thing too, you can just go through here and now you've got a pretty good underlying shape to kind of go. And if you want to, again, just go to the sides and use your move brush to, and we think we still have auto masking topological turned on. Oh, another one too is if you go into your move brush and go in here to curve, you can turn on AccuCurve, and that will allow you to kind of pull out the corners a little bit better. So we can be like, hey, I want to pull out to this corner and then straighten this off. And then, you know, and that we're kind of, let's make it like, so we're pulling out to an obvious corner here just to kind of straighten this. Let's say we're doing a helmet or something. You can use this to kind of dial in. There's our line, and then go back in with your H brush or H polish brush or your clay buildup or your Damien standard. And then you can start, you know, again, just carving in those planes of your face. And notice we're not really using a ton of smooth, right? So just go through here, hold down Alt, and I'm not smoothing anything. I'm just using H polish. And then if I want to put a big old bevel down this corner, instead of H polish, because that's going to respect edges, you can use trim dynamic. That's not going to respect edges. You just go bloop right along here. And then now that you have edges, you can go back in with your H polish brush and just polish this result here. Again, hold down Alt and let go of Alt. And of course, while you're working, control drag to redynamesh or whatever. Let's pick a resolution. There we go. And then go back in here and just continue to clean up. So not smoothing, because you're right. Smoothing is going to, well, there's also two smoothing algorithms, right? If you hold down Shift, that's just going, kind of like when we were polishing with the open circle, closed circle. If you hold down Shift and just smooth, it's not going to respect your volumes. If you hold down Shift to smooth and then let go of Shift, it will respect your volumes. It'll kind of push the geometry over the underlying volume here. So you can use that to your advantage too, because the regular smooth will make things really soft. The not regular smooth will kind of push the geometry along that surface. So again, retaining your volumes, making things possibly a little less goopy. You can also, when you're dynameshing, by the way, you can geometry dynamesh. There is a polish function over here. So if you control drag, it'll go through and kind of run a polish for you. There's also clay polish in here. You can run this and then control drag to get rid of that. So you can go through here if you want to sharpen, resharp your edges or whatever. You can over crank that and really get some facet looks going. And then you go back in here with your H polish and just continue to kind of move stuff around and whatever. Yeah, so for a beginner, good point. That might have also been why that was popular. Is what were we talking about? We were talking about like the SpongeBob that I did being like the numero uno. And I buried it down here. Same thing. So this type of modeling is also really, it's kind of fun. Do I even have my Mario? I don't have my Mario on here. I should put it on there. So there's some really fun stuff. If you're just beginning in ZBrush, you want to make like fun cartoon characters. SpongeBob is good. The Mario live stream is good. Make your own Mario, kind of the same deal, where you just start with primitives and Boolean and ZRemesh, some really fun stuff in there. And then also, it seems like there was another one, Mario, SpongeBob, and yeah, Finn. That was kind of an older one. I don't know if and Mickey Mouse, or Steamboat Willie, Mickey Mouse. This guy, making him was the exact same process. Super fun, super easy to do, and it's basically just breaking down the shapes, Booleaning them together. You can ZRemeshing the result. So check those out. They're really fun, I think. Yes, works with cleavage. That's the key to success for hitting the front page and getting clicks. Let's see, AMD Intel, which is best for ZBrush? ZBrush is memory intensive and CPU intensive. They have some GPU plugin stuff like Bevel Pro, I think. But for the most part, it's RAM and CPU. although you get into conversations about, well, it's single threaded for some things and it's multi-threaded for other things, and it's also based on your bandwidth or your throughput or the fat pipes in your computer, so making sure you have a good motherboard. I don't know. ZBrush will run on a toaster, so as far as like picking a CPU for maximum ZBrush performance, that I don't know, because I don't do just everything in ZBrush. I take things in ZBrush and then I throw it out here, so I need a good GPU, I need a good CPU, I do ray trace rendering, and I do, there's all sorts of things that I do, video editing and stuff. So, you know what? Speaking of all this, workstation. These are a bit old, but here's my latest workstation here. If you want to check that out. I think that's an AMD with a NVIDIA GPU. Threadripper. I've used Threadripper since they came out, and I haven't not used a Threadripper, so that's what I use. I can't give you numbers. I can't be like, here's my spreadsheet and all the research I've done. I don't got that. Someone else will have to give you the, if it exists. You can go in preferences, performance. I want to say in here you can like do some stuff and run some things. I don't know. I've never really thought about performance in ZBrush that much. I would tend to work optimized enough in ZBrush to where, now granted, if you are making 100 million polygon subtools, you probably should find that out, but I don't really work that way, so hasn't come up for me. Is it possible to delete all ZTools open in a project to say, oh, you know what? I don't think there is. You can go through, just in case people stopping by, you can go through on any of these. If you want to, if you like doing the old file save as, and that's going to save everything in here. Unfortunately, I think you have to go through here. Something's tickling the back of my brain on this one too, where maybe it's like a Z plugin subtool master thing. Delete. Yeah, that would be a good plugin to have, where it's like, hey, all I want is this thing I've been messing around with. Let's bring him back to normal. I've just been working on this guy, and I want to delete everything else in my scene. Something, again, there's something, I feel like there is a way to maybe approach doing this. Now, here's the scary thing. You can hit R, and that'll clear it out, but they still exist. So you still have to go through here and say, like, delete all. Boy, I just made it a lot harder on myself. It is fairly easy when they're all out here to just go through here and delete all, but once they're all packed into this palette, it's a little harder to see, but deleting all will get it out of here. And then eventually you'll get it down to just nothing. Now make sure they're not hidden in here. Delete all. And then when you go to file save as, that's a good question. I wish there was a button for that. If it exists, somebody shout it out. Someone knows. Leave a comment. Does delete loop worked only on masked area? It's like, I don't know. Let's see. Only one way to find out, right? Let's make this back to our original. What was it? 128, something like that. Make Polymesh 30. So if I say mask, and I go down here to delete loops, and we're going to be aggressive with it. Yeah, look at that. Huh. Not too shabby. I might use this more. Thanks, commenters. I think that might be useful. Question for organic hard surface. And I have polygroups. I have a good topology made by ZRemesh, but the borders of the polygroups are still weedy, like they are handmade. Was the best way to smooth them. So topology made by ZRemesh, but the borders are still kind of messed up. Hold on. Let me see. Like they're handmade. Borders are, so what's the best way to smooth them? So if you do, so kind of like when we talked about, if you go through here and you say you make a polygroup border and then you hit Control W and that's the result, you can go through here and you can say Ed Zoop Mask Border, that'll slice through it. But in your case, it's more like I ZRemesh half, depth size down to 0, keep groups turned on, and it went in, keep groups, smooth groups down to 0. It went in and kind of built in that. This is a good example of going back in here with, like, again, your smooth brush. We talked about it earlier in this video, but hold down shift, change your weighted smooth mode to 6. You can manually go in and smooth that out, and then ZRemesh. You can turn on, if you have keep groups, you can turn smooth groups up and it'll smooth that for you before, but I don't like to trust that. I like to smooth it myself. If you have a bunch of things you need to smooth out at once, that's when you can go in here and do your whole, like, masking, mask your polygroup border, and then control tap to invert it, and then go into, like, deformation, polish by feature, and just tap, and that'll go through and smooth all those borders out at once. So then you can go through here and you know, get your smoother ZRemesh result, if I understand correctly. Borders of polygroups, yeah. So I think smoothing them all out at once is probably mask by feature, your polygroup border. Usually you'll probably have something more like this, where it's like, let's say delete lower, Control D, there you go. Something like you, and then you got some masks that are too aliased. That's when this comes in handy. And sometimes you want to do like a little grow mask, control tap to invert. If you want to retain your volumes, which you might, polish by feature, close circle, just tap that a few more times and that'll just smooth those out, and then ZRemesh. Now you'd want to do this before you ZRemeshed. If you're talking about, like, hey, I ZRemeshed, ZRemesh, keep groups, smooth groups down to 0. And I have subdivisions and I don't want to change my geometry. Exact same thing, just mask by feature, invert, polish, or just go in here and hold down shift to smooth with 6 turned on. That'll polish just your border. So basically by masking first, you're protecting the detail that's in those areas and then smoothing just the borders. But you probably want to smooth the borders before you ZRemesh, generally speaking. Creasing with masks. That's what I was looking. Yes, you got it. That's exactly right. So for anybody stopping by, that was the new feature I was looking for, because I was like, God, there's something you can do if you like mask edge loop complete, for example, and, you know, they can mask these 2 edges. You can go down to, is it under creasing? So geometry, crease masked, uncrease, unmasked, crease, unmasked. Oh, it's unmasked. Okay, so crease, unmasked. There you go. So wherever you have unmasked edges, it'll go through and crease, as opposed to going through here and, you know, hovering over the edge and saying crease, edge loop complete, or whatever. If you happen to have masking and not polygroups, or you can crease polygroups, you can crease masking, whatever you want to use. Yes, that was it. Cool. Pivot Master plugin. Let's check it out. ZBrush. Gizmo functionality. Pivot Master. There you go. Pivot Master plugin. Haven't used it, but that way you don't have to do the whole, because I guess you could have a proxy. Yeah, you're still going to have to reconstruct your subdivisions. Yeah, Pivot Master. That makes sense. That sounds right. Let's see. Let me see. Oh yeah, that was the Paul. So if it's just, I mean, at that point, it is just kind of like it's kind of a poly painting thing. So it would be like, I mean, you could also do it in a texture outside of ZBrush, but in ZBrush, let's say ZRemesh half. We don't really have groups, but we'll say X symmetry turned on. You know what? We'll ZRemesh with X symmetry. There we go. Control D, Control D, Control D. Honestly, what I would do, just as a good starting point, is you can go through here. If there's good reference of this eyeball, let me see. Save image as desktop, texture, import, texture, add. We'll get rid of this Goggins. We'll scale this up. And I'm going to take this intensity here and just crank that to the right just a select it, and then say just crank this to the right just a little bit, because that'll turn, if you have pure blacks, they're going to start turning transparent. So I'm going to make those pure blacks just a very dark gray, and I can always change them. So now I can go through here and say, you know what, this will be my starting point for my eyeball. X symmetry turned off. Yes, X symmetry turned off. So go through here and RGB, and underneath your brush, this isn't a very high resolution image, so find a higher resolution image, but brush samples, turn on spotlight projection, and then let's turn this down a little bit here. RGB at 100%. Make Polymesh 3D. Yes. More resolution. Spotlight projection, standard brush, RGB. What am I doing wrong? L off. Let me think. Skin shader 4. Colorize is on. Spotlight projection is on. Huh. Let's do this. We've been working for a while. I'll figure it out. Anyway, what I would do is use that as my starting point, just to be like, hey, if my eyeball just needs to look like this, just paint that eyeball right onto the sphere, and then we can go in. There's a lot of fun things we can do as far as, let's try that again. Sphere, edit, make Polymesh 3D, X symmetry, ZRemesh half, depth size down to 0, just to get a little bit better sculptable geometry. Go in here to Skin Shader 4, Control D to subdivide a few times, texture import, grab our reference, select the texture, add it to Spotlight. We'll zoom it up just a little bit. We'll turn this down a little bit. Again, we'll go into intensity and crank it to the left. That shouldn't affect anything. I've done that a million times and painted through it. Line this up with the eyeball. Standard brush samples. Spotlight projection, RGB on. There we go. X symmetry off. So now go through here and just paint that on there, and then go and just kind of clean up. You can tap C to sample, and then we'll just color that in. We'll turn L to turn off lazy mouse. So we can do this, and then you could use extractor to kind of just copy this. In fact, let's try BX extractor, and then we'll tap G to kind of sample this. Actually, we'll control tap the latest point in history, so we can sample G, and this is so low res, sorry about that, but find a higher res. The alpha we don't even need, and then we can just use the texture to kind of go through and be like, hey, we'll finish this ring out, finish that ring out. You know, again, C to sample, go through here and color, whatever you want, but just kind of recreate this eyeball. You can also go in here to Polypaint, and you can say adjust colors. So if you wanted to change it from blue, you could hue shift it over, or whatever you want, or you could even select just the blue. Let's go in here and click and drag and select just the blue, and then hue shift just these things to whatever you'd like. Unmasked, and then it also we do have subdivision history on this, but you can go in here to Z plugin and say UV master and say work on clone, and that'll drop it down to subdivision level 1, and I can go to the back and say, you know what, let's make this a polygroup, and then we can say symmetry off, polygroups on, unwrap. So if we flatten this, there's our new UVs. We can say copy UVs, go back to our eyeball, paste UVs, and now if we go down here to our texture map, we can say create new from Polypaint, and that's weird. Oh, I must have, did I really do that? Yeah, I went right down the middle of the eyeball. Let's say delete all. That's one tricky thing, huh? Because if I want to say, okay, down here, that's the 4 points. Work on clone. Okay. Okay, that does stick with it. Okay, so I'm going to say, okay, on this one, this is where I want my border to be on the clone. Turn that texture off. There's where I want the real border. So I can say unwrap with polygroups turned on, flatten. There we go. Unflatten, copy UVs. Go back here, paste our UVs, and then we'll just update that texture map, new from Polypaint. Boop, there we go. So we're going to transfer our Polypaint to our texture, and there you go. You can say clone texture, export, and then export this as a JPEG, PSD, whatever, and then go and paint on it. And now you have UVs for your object, and you can even go in here to texture, and just like we did for our Polypaint, you can say adjust colors on your texture to whatever you want. Say OK. You can grab that texture, boop, and then you can turn that texture map. Even if you went out, textured it, and brought it back in, you can say Polypaint, Polypaint from texture. That'll transfer your texture to your Polypaint and turn your texture off. So now your Polypaint has been updated based on any texture changes you made. So you kind of juggle a little bit. If you did a video about dynamics or models design or about fabric for characters in a video game, actually that goes back to what I originally wanted to cover. You know what? We'll use the last 15 minutes to maybe fold close. But to answer your question, yes, I do have a few videos. If you just type in Marvelous, there's a Marvelous and ZBrush quick start full playlist, and then here's like using UVs to make a pattern in Marvelous and hop back and forth and ZRemesh and all that good stuff. So a little bit of ZBrush Marvelous stuff. Do you rig for work with Blender? A tiny bit. Most of my rigging is done in my character creator. I mean, I got a tiny, like I got some rigging stuff. Probably the most comprehensive rigging things are going to be the Reallusion character creator playlist that you can take your ZBrush stuff and throw it over and rig it up and weight it and then apply animations, and you can get really, really far with facial expressions or expression wrinkles with ZBrush too. Really, really fun stuff to do. But that's through character creator. Blender, I mean, there is a little bit in here on Blender, but not a ton. Now that I mention that, I feel like there's more videos. Fully rigged character-based meshes. This is the one that I go into Blender a tiny bit, but not a bunch. Ran ZBrush 15-year-old computer for years. So what computer you need for ZBrush isn't a very... Yeah, I would agree with that. It's kind of hard to give you like, this is the exact one you want for the optimum whatever. It's like, well, and also, like I said, I don't, I do ZBrush and I do other stuff. So having an all-purpose is kind of my best bet for me personally. I did use Marvelous Designer for the cloud. Oops, I killed that one, didn't I? I got it. We'll do this. We're under recording. AB. If you want to see the making of that, by the way, again, on my ArtStation page, I believe, my profile, I feel like, yeah, so right in here, we have, you know what? You can go to my YouTube channel and see this, but it's also right here. So that'll run you through the Marvelous Designer stuff, and actually using project history in ZBrush and ZRemesh. Basically, this is all ZRemesh and project history, and a little bit of Marvelous and a little bit of cloth sculpting brushes in ZBrush for this particular suit, which I need to find. That was under recording name Cozy Cooper model body and suit. There we go. Messed around with AI, which creates meshes and images. I haven't. Shortest path and masking. You know what? So okay, can we do the opposite? That's a good point. So if we have a cylinder here and we say make Polymesh 3D, and we want to, so you can go through here with a point and you can say crease shortest path. So I want to crease from this point to this point, and it'll go and it'll make that. But we can't masking, mask by crease, or the opposite, which we can do, which is geometry, crease, crease unmask, crease uncrease unmask, crease unmasked. But we can't mask. Let me see. Crease, mask, point, but we can't. That would be cool. Shortest path mask, yeah. Or I I've got my crease. Now mask my creases. There might be a way to do that. Maybe. It's not popping up in my brain. But see if you can mess around with that long enough to mask a shortest pass crease. That's a good one. I have a cylinder. I want to extrude multiple poly loops around it to have a ribbed effect, but I don't know how to select multiple poly loops. So if you have well, this is a fun one. I'm going to do something really weird first, but if you do just a plain old cylinder that hasn't been, it still is an initialized state, so it's not real polygons that you can mess with just yet. There is something weird in here you can do. So you can go in here to masking, mask by alpha, and you can say, let's say 3 and 1. So you can say column. So mask it all, and then say mask by alpha, 3, let's see, 1 and 1. Maybe it's row. Column. There we go. So you can set this up to be, okay, I guess select. It just took me a second. 2, skip 1. Then you can say column, and it'll go through and mask like that. Or you can say row, and it'll go through and select that way. And then at that point, you can go through and say like inflate or whatever, and that'll give you that. So but that's when you're in the initialized state. Once you're out of this state, and you're over here, you're just like make Polymesh 3D, then you would have to go through here and say, okay, you could do mask poly loop, and you can just go through here every other one and just mask like this, and then invert that, and then inflate. I like to see it, so I like to go in here and say polygroup, so I can go through here and just make a polygroup wherever I want it, and then I can hover over one of those and say, you could even do transpose polygroup all, and then go to unmesh mesh center, and then just you can scale. I hold down Alt, and you can scale along just these axes, or you can scale. This is going to scale from the middle, right? So you want to hold down Alt and just scale on those two axes. Also, if you want, you can go down here to geometry delete. So edge loop, delete loops. Oh, those have polygroups. It respects polygroups. How about that? Huh. That's handy. Anyway, you can delete loops, and then you can go in here, and you can use that to your advantage too. Now, if this is a bent cylinder, this isn't going to work, but you can go in here for the straight cylinder, say insert multiple edge loops. Instead of keep polygroup, have the alternate polygroup come in. So now you can go through here, we can tap Alt to give it new polygroups here, and then now you can go through here and say like QMesh polygroup all, you can hold down Shift. Oh, actually, that's not going to work, is it? Let's do this. Let's do inset polygroup all legacy. We'll pull in a little inset here, and now we can say QMesh polygroup all, hold down Shift, and pull along that surface normal. Yeah, I guess that makes sense, huh? But if we do transpose polygroup all, invert, yeah, that's why, because it's not gonna, it's grabbing too much, man. Put a little inset here, and then switch over to QMesh. To play with that. Anyway, a couple different options for you. As far as selecting multiple polygroups, it is just a matter of going through here. It's not really selecting, it's just masking. That's the only difference between ZBrush and the other programs. So there's going through here and saying either mask. If you're just doing one, you can do transpose poly loop. So just through here, you just want to inflate that one. Just go to Unmesh Mesh Center, hold down Alt to pull along those two, and you can just do that. Multiple, it's go through here, and instead of transpose, you want to do mask poly loop, and then you just go through here and do this. But if you already have your polygroup set up like this, you can go in here and you can say, that's when you go here, like QMesh, hover over a face, QMesh polygroup all, and then you can just hold down Shift to pull along the surface. But it's still not going to work, is it? Because we can mask poly loop, or hover over face, mask polygroup all. But because they're in between everything, so it'll work on this one. It's just grabbing too much. So we can say mask polygroup all on the blue ones, Control Tab to invert that mask, and then go in here and, do that. So you can use masking in polygroups. That makes sense. Main doubts and ZRemesh should use Dynamesh versus SubDivision when exactly to jump from one to the other. How much level of detail to add in Dynamesh stage when it's perfect time to jump to SubDiv? Long story short, it's basically, if we go back to our little guy here, F to frame, and we'll say Dynamesh this down at resolution of 8 here. So we're at Dynamesh here. Oh, that's right. This one has a bunch of stuff on it. Ugh. Layers, bake all, delete lower, X symmetry turned on, Dynamesh, damage modify topology, mirror and weld, clear the mask. There we go. So we have our object here. We're in Dynamesh mode, and it kind of depends on you where that line is. But for me, if I'm not doing anything that's taxing my geometry, if I'm not going through here and being like, hey, let me go crazy with this ear, right? And then start doing this. If I'm still doing this type of work, then yeah, keep Dynamesh on until you're kind of done with this type of thing. As soon as you're done really moving your geometry around and now you're working on like secondary or even like tertiary forms and polishing your secondary forms, if your primary forms are locked in, give or take, this is the point where you start going through here and ZRemeshing and projecting your detail back, getting your subdivision history, and getting out of Dynamesh. Like, granted, you can take Dynamesh to final. Stranger things have happened in this world. It's totally doable. However, for me, usually when I'm done really doing crazy things with my silhouette, that's when I ZRemesh, project, and I know I got tons of videos on that. Yeah, ZRemesh and project, and also project history is really a good one. So, and all clothing, it's good. So this one here will be helpful. Cool, thanks, Marco. Awesome. All right, so let's, the very end, let's talk about this. So let's say we have an object here and we want to fold. We got a cool tech suit and it's on there. And if you want to see the making of, we've talked about that already. However, let's say we want to fold this suit. You know, we do have subdivisions on here. But what I'm going to do is, actually, I'm going to go down to subdivision level 1. We're going to break this suit up just because normally you're probably not going to fold an entire tech suit like this. You're probably going to have a shirt and pants. So let's do that. I'm going to hold down Control Shift, go in here to select lasso, and right along here, we'll say this is the shirt portion of what we want to do. And the pants are the bottom portion. So you can hit Control W to make that a polygroup, actually. Looks like I missed some here. Yoink. Control W. There we go. So now we got shirt and pants. If I go up here to subdivision level 5, and then we say, let's turn this on so we can, I don't think we'll lose it. Nope, not the body. The suit here. So we have Polypaint on here, right? Yes, okay. That's all I wanted to see. So we have this here, and if we go in here to Polyframe, we're up at subdivision level 5. I can delete lower. I went down to subdivision level 1 to make my polygroups. Went up to subdivision level 5, delete lower. I can Control Shift tap that. I can say split hidden, and then I can reconstruct my subdivisions back, all the way back to subdivision level 1. So now I have a shirt and a pants, all with subdivisions here. And the only thing I'm worried about now, let's test it. Okay, there's our pants there. Great. So for the shirt, for example, one thing I want to make sure I don't lose is my UV. So a couple ways to test that is we can go down here to UV map. We could say morph UV. I'm going to turn bump down to 0. So it just lays flat. And we can morph UV out. There we go. It morphed out. Looks like it's good. You can also go in here to texture map. And you can say new from UV map or UV check. And that'll show you the UV. So we're in good shape. So we went to highest, we went to lowest, made our polygroups, went back to highest, deleted lower, split them apart, reconstructed, kept our UVs. Everyone's happy, especially me. So now I want to fold these clothes. I'm going to hold down Shift, and we're going to turn off everything but the suit. So for example, if I want to fold these clothes, I'm going to go down to subdivision level 1, and we're going to actually turn off our Polypaint here. We'll go in here, you know, we'll keep on Skin Shader 4. We'll go into Polyframe.
So let's say I want to fold this up. I'm going to hit W, go to Unmask Mesh Center, and we're going to go to, so BTR is transpose regular, I guess you could call it. As you drag down, it'll kind of give you that really soft fall off. If you go to BTC, that's transpose classic, and that'll give you that harsher fall off. If you go to BTA, that is transpose cloth. So when we move the object here, for example, if we scale the object, if we do it with BTC, for example, transpose classic, it just scales it, right? Non-uniformly. BTA will take into account dynamic stuff. If you want to know more about dynamics, then you're in luck, because that was a ZBrush What's New, ZBrush 2021. This one here, this massive 106 video playlist has tons of stuff on dynamic cloth. So you can just click on here, watch whatever you want. You can hop over to YouTube. You can go into this little menu right here. You can even do a search, Control F, cloth, and that'll be, here's 23 videos on a whole bunch of cloth functionality. Really cool stuff in there. I'll give you the short one. So basically, firmness is set to 2, and simulation iterations is set to 100. So the higher the simulation iterations is set, the more accurate your simulation will be. So, and you also move it slower, and that'll allow it time to calculate maintaining the relationships between your verts to simulate cloth while it's moving. Also firmness. So right now, if you turn firmness down to 1, we're going to get a lot more wrinkles, right? Because it's allowing the relationship. The algorithm is saying, hey, you can be more like silk. If you crank firmness up, that's going to be more like, hey, you're more like denim. And it's actually going to kind of have like an inflating kind of effect. So you can also go in here and turn on inflate. So while you're moving stuff around, it'll inflate the geometry. So every time we wiggle it, it's running calculations based on, you know, these settings in here. So we'll turn off inflate. So long story short, we can just kind of squeeze this in, maybe firmness up to 3, and that will allow us to kind of flatten this shirt out. If you kind of want to flatten it out without any of this turned on, again, just go back to BTC. You can kind of cheat it a little bit and be like, hey, I'm just going to flatten the shirt without any wrinkling, and then go back to BTA, and we can go through here and we can say, okay, let's wrinkle this up a little bit. Now, easy masking, you can go through here, hold down Control and say Mask Lasso, and you can say, okay, mask this shoulder out and then invert that mask. You can also go in here to Polygroups and say Auto Groups with UV, and now you've got some decent polygroups. Let's hold down Control Shift. You can Control Shift tap and isolate and mask and invert. You can also hit W and Control tap to easily mask these things out. If you want to, you can also grab a little piece of 2 of them, do Control Shift Q, which is different than Control Shift A. That's Control Shift A, visibility grow all. Control Shift Q is visibility grow polygroup. Control W. Control W. Now you've got easy selectable polygroup. Same thing for this little belt down here. Just gonna do Control Shift Q, Control W. Or if you want it as all as part of the shirt, it's up to you. Just easy selections what you're going for, and using your UVs is a good way to do that. Now, if I hit Control tap on this sleeve here and I want to fold this shirt, I can go through here and I can set my pivot. However, even with BTA, so transpose cloth, this is going to, everything that's unmasked, so if on brushed, is going to be simulated, but everything that's not masked is just going to kind of be frozen. So it's kind of hard. You can kind of fold things, but kind of not. An easier way to do this is to go through here and say unmasked. And what that's going to do is freeze this portion, the unmasked portion, and then the masked portion will actually simulate. So you can go through and you can just kind of rotate this around and then very quickly kind of go through and start folding this over. Now, if you move too fast, sometimes this geometry will start shearing. It's kind of hard to predict when it will or when it won't. The X symmetry turned off. Huh, I guess it's not masked, but it gets a little ornery sometimes. So just moving slow, like I said, helps. And then also your firmness, you can move that up or down if you want to maintain your volumes a little bit better. And while you're doing this, you can also go through here and just do a little bit of smoothing just to kind of help that out a little bit. And then also, if you want to switch back to on brushed, you can go through here and you can scale this down, and again, this section will be simulated now, and you'll get wrinkles when you scale that in. And then you can switch it back to unmasked, and now we've got this arm basically fold it over. And again, you can be aggressive with it, and you can say, you know what, this is going to be at the bottom of the laundry pile, and this thing's going to be completely folded over and twisted. Feel free to do that. But again, if you want to just kind of play it safe and just be like, okay, this arm is going to be wrapped in front here, and then we can invert this mask, and we can also switch back to on brushed, and we can scale all this stuff in, and then switch back to here, and then switch back to on masked, and then continue to fold these things in. Same thing for this arm, just control tap, go in here, switch to on brushed, or on masked, sorry. Set the pivot, and then we'll fold this over like so. And again, it's freezing, and don't move too fast. Sometimes it does fine, and then other times it really wants to shear that geometry. I'm not sure exactly what's happening there. Yeah, this stuff right here. Why is it doing that? I'm not quite sure. It's like a weird fall off or something. But anyway, long story short, it'll allow you to kind of freeze this geometry and then pull the other geometry along with it. So now, again, this is kind of how we would fold a shirt, maybe. I don't know, you may have different folding techniques than me, but we'll go through here. And then again, you can just continue masking down the shirt, and then this is still unmasked, so now you can go through here, and you can say, okay, just follow along, and kind of drape, keep masking, hit W, move your pivot, drape this down. Now you can also do self-collision, so if you turn on self-collision, like set to 1, when you're moving stuff around, it will collide with itself, but it does tend to have a kind of inflate effect. And one thing you're going to notice is some geometry will start poking through. In fact, if we go to display properties, we can turn on double, and you'll see a little bit easier back sides of meshes poking through. Easy way to fix this, go into your move brush, turn on brush auto masking, and you can turn on backface mask. I have a hotkey for that, so I can just very quickly there you go. Very quickly just toggle backface masking on and off for any brush that I have selected. Alt W, Alt F. There we go. So with backface masking on, it's easy just to grab these backface masks and then just pull them through the geometry, or it should be. You can also Control-Shift tap just that polygroup and then go in here. Now on this one, if you hold down Control-Shift, it will smooth this out okay. Sometimes on an open border, you need to go in here to smooth brush modifiers, change min connected to 1, and that will allow you to smooth open borders. Otherwise, it's going to freeze those open borders. Anyway, so there's that. We've moved, we've folded stuff. Oh, and then now, if you want to say append a sphere here. Ooh, it's tiny. Let's say deformation unify. No, it's going to keep it tiny, isn't it? Anyway, we'll go ahead and we'll make a quick chair. So here's the bottom part of the chair. Here's actually, let's do this. If we're sitting on a chair, it'll probably be something like that. And we're going to go through here with knife curve. We're going to slice the back of this off. We're going to turn on X symmetry. We're going to say ZRemesh half, depth size down to 0, keep groups. Oops. Smooth groups down to 0. It's already smooth since we sliced it. There we go. So there's the front of the seat. Control drag out. Here's the back of the seat here. And then if we want to put bars or whatever on here, I guess the easiest way to do that would be something like a Z-sphere here. And we'll say E. Scale it up. Scale it. Okay, fine. Deformation. I'm working at a very, very large scale here, so let's just go in here to size. There we go. And then move. And now E should work a little better. There we go. So W, we'll go through here and we'll say this will be a support for one side. Q, it'll go down here somewhere. And then Q, it'll go over here somewhere. Q, 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 something like this. Yeah, that's fine. And then we'll say, just like we did earlier, I can go into my custom menu here, depth size density down to 1, Dynamesh down to 0. For y'all, it'll be something like adaptive skin, density down to 1, Dynamesh resolution down to 1. Hit A to preview or hit that preview button. We'll go ahead and say, you know what? We'll say make adaptive skin. And we'll go over here and we'll say append our result here, and we'll say that Z0 we can delete. We don't need it anymore. And now we can say, you know what? Let's do maybe something a little more jaunty, like so. I'm going to do a quick mirror and weld across the x-axis, and then we can even go through here and do something like Control-Shift, select lasso. Let's get rid of this cap, and let's get rid of this cap here. And we'll say Geometry Modify Topology, delete hidden. And now I'm going to go through here and say bridge, 2 holes. I think spline might work okay. We'll see. You can kind of bridge these together. If you want to keep it a little tighter, you can say maybe small round corners. You can just try the different settings and see if any of those, yeah, that'll work. Here, and then same thing for here. Boom, boom. There we go. I'm going to hit Control W. We can say ZRemesh same, depth size down to 0. Just get even geometry, then go through here and just do a quick polish by feature open circle, smooth it all down, inflate it back up. These corners kind of got nasty, didn't they? Yeah, when we don't ZRemesh. You know what? This is fine. Polish it down so that's working pretty good. It's nice and smooth. Inflate it back up, and then ZRemesh same maybe. There we go. So now we've got, I made a chair. Congratulations. And that kind of dips down, but be careful when you're bridging those things. Anyway, long story short, I now have an object that I can collide with. So if I Alt tap this, when we have this thing tapped, selected, I should say, this is going to tell the dynamics that this is my cloth object, and then anything else that's visible is collidable. I'm going to say collision volume turned on. That's going to look at this unselected stuff and turn it into a collision volume. I'm going to crank up the resolution so it's nice and detailed. Inflate, I don't need an inflate around it, so I'll turn it down to 0. And now we can go through here and we can say position this over it, and we'll turn off line. And you could try to do this where you just go through here, turn gravity down quite a bit, and then just do, let's turn collision down to 0. Then we do run simulation. Maybe gravity up a little bit. We are working at you know what? This is what we're going to do. Just because I want things a little more predictable, Z plugin, Subtool Master, not Subtool Master, Scale Master, ZBrush Scale Unify. I'm knocking everything down. Ooh, lots of stuff. There we go. So now, suit and chair. We do have to recalculate because we changed it, so I'm going to turn on. Oh, we could have just hit recalc, but we can also just turn it off and on. There we go. So now, if I go through here and my gravity's down, and I say run simulation, turn it on brushed, sorry. There we go. It'll go through and drape the cloth, right? So this is where you can kind of dial in self-collision, maybe turn up the firmness a little bit, maybe turn down your gravity strength, and kind of use this to your advantage. But you're going to see, if you let it go too long, this stuff's going to start flattening out, and then this stuff's going to kind of drape behind. So what I tend to do is I'll go through with my transpose cloth, BTA, and then I'll just kind of go through here so it starts colliding with the chair. But before it flattens out, I'm going to hold down Control Alt, and then again, we can Control Tap to blur that mask, and then go back in here to on masked and just start simulating this around. So it'll kind of collide with the underlying mesh, and you can also switch to on brushed, and that'll start colliding this geometry. But if you hit it too hard, it's going to start flattening. So just have it collide just a bit, or just enough, or maybe not at all. I'll leave it up to you. And then you can go through here. So this is kind of like folding and then draping. There's a lot more cool stuff you can do. Again, we'll switch to on masked here. That'll kind of bring the mask part along with it here. And that way, and then you can just follow up with any moving you want to do. Another thing too, if we turn off Backface Mask, is now that you've got things folded over each other and they're kind of hard to access, remember, it's like, I want to mask the back half of this arm, but you can kind of control drag through and it's not really giving you what you need. Remember, you can always go back down here to UV map, morph UV. There you go. And now it's all laid out. So now you can say, here's that back half of the arm that I want masked, and then morph it back. And then now you have your morph. And if you want easy access to it, just hit Control W, and now that back half will always be nice and selectable for you to mask or invert mask or whatever. Whew. something like that. Cool. What does an optimized model mean for a game? Some people say that ZRemesher is not optimized because the grid is still not suitable for animating and showing for evaluation. Yeah, if you're going to be submitting your portfolio to ILM, well, I don't know. There's probably a use case for just ZRemesher, set it and forget it. Bad example. If you're going to something that's super highly optimized, you're doing topology for an MMO that has to run on a mobile platform, you're going to have to be very precise about where those edge loops go, and then you have to go through and basically hand retopologize. ZRemesher is just going to, it's an automatic thing. It's not going to give you polygons exactly where you want it necessarily. So to answer your question of like, what's the best way to retopologize for animation? What's that? Hippie Drome's a good resource. HippieDrome.com. They'll walk you through where you want to put your edges, and I don't know, there's a lot of math and stuff that goes in here. Check this out. That's for like hand doing your stuff. Just for quick and dirty stuff like I do for my live streams, ZRemesh is usually good enough. And as far as like, I mean, I do go in a bit on like character and facial animation stuff, but mostly I'm just using a base mesh that's pre-existing and then go through and change and modify those blend shapes. So see, there's a good example. I don't know. You can watch these videos, and that kind of hops back and forth between Character Creator and ZBrush. Cool. Hey, Punching Ball, you got here just in time to see me leave. I gotta go to the bathroom. Independent line pattern on the lapel. Let me see if I can do that real quick. On lapel. Yeah, if I had a picture, I could probably walk you through it. Independent line pattern on the lapel. I mean, there's a lot of ways. I mean, actually, just going back through this video, if it's about snapping a line to a surface or creating or masking a line in a path, yeah, we've covered that just on this video. So yeah, go back in time and there might be an answer in there. Separated mesh under one subtool. I can do it only by left clicking on gizmo mode and then visibility grow all. Select separated mesh under one subtool. So left clicking. So you can isolate a piece of a subtool. So if you Control Shift click something that's polygrouped, it's pretty fast. Or you can grab a little piece of it, like you're saying, grab a little piece and then can do Control Shift A to grab the whole object from a multiple object. Let me see, make polymesh 30 full line W, Control drag, and then Control drag. So here is, we can do, if you have auto groups, you can just Control Shift tap and that'll select an individual component of a multi-part subtool. If you don't have that, grabbing a little piece of it, Control Shift A will give you visibility. Oh, and so you're saying like, hey, if it's fine, but if I have auto groups here, and then I want to say polygroup, we can do a regroup visible. So now we've got like tons of polygroups on here. If I turn off line, too many polygroups, right? Yeah, you might want to Control Shift A on a polygroup, or grab a little piece, Control Shift A, or W, Control Mask, Unmask All, Grow Mask All, Hide Point. Yeah, everything I'm thinking of involves 3 or 4 button clicks. There's not a, hey, this is a separate piece. Very quickly, you might be able to like record a macro for it, maybe. Ooh, that's a good one. I'm not sure. Usually for me, it's just a little piece, Control Shift A is the fastest way for me to do it. Polypaint from Polygroup colors. Yeah, so if we hit Control D a bunch of times, ooh, not that many. Yeah, back that off. Okay, so we have polygroups on here, and we can say, I want to polypaint from polygroups. Bing! And now, if we turn off Polyframe, all of those have been transferred to, all the polygroup colors have been transferred to Polypaint. Yeah, and vice versa too. If you do have a Polypaint on here, and if you hit Control W so they're all one polygroup, you can also go in here to Polygroups and do the opposite. I think Polygroups from Polypaint. There you go. And now your polygroups are based on, if we turn off Polypaint and turn on line and color, they'll be, kind of picked up some, not other, but got close. Cool. I do have some videos. I'm going to have to hop off real quick, but there is, if you go in here to my channel here and do UVs, this one right here, the ZRemesh 2023 UV map unwrap, that one I think covers, this one covers quite a bit. This gives you the old school UV master, which is still super useful, but also the new creasing unwrap functionality. So undeformable curves for rigid chains on solid materials. Curves deform the meshes at least a bit. That I'm not sure, because you're right. Curves, well, yeah. What you could do is use have your curve only pulling around a plane, and have those planes drive nanomesh, and then nanomesh you can set up so where it stays rigid with the polygon faces. So you can actually use polygons with nanomesh to keep things very rigid as a kind of an IMM proxy, but that's a little out there. Anyway, thanks everybody. I'll let you all get back to it, and catch you on the flip side.